down a little bit. Do. And we're live. Cecil Lammey is on assignment. We're watching that assignment. It's been quite an evening already, and we're here to add more to your evening. Dr. Jene Bramel, Matt, Waldman, Sigmund Bloom here, hosting the Audible live. And before we get into the carnage, to the blood and guts, well, I guess we're going to get into the blood and guts, Matt, with a first half recap.
Yeah, I mean, certainly to start off the game, I mean, Kansas City took the lead early, and you certainly saw that the passing game still wasn't really clicking there for Patrick Mahomes, and Tyreek Hill didn't get a reception in the first half at all. But LaShawn McCoy had a nice little cutback run that he improvised, and, some short passing got them into the end zone with a pass to Mecole Hardman. And then, Denver was able to drive, but missed a field goal. And then there were some turnovers in terms of some nice, there was a nice B-gap cross blitz by a pair of linebackers where Philip Lindsay picked up one blocker but couldn't pick up both, and the guard wasn't, or the tackle wasn't able to pick that guy up because he was assigned to somebody else. So that free man came through and forced a fumble on Flacco. And overall, Flacco's getting a little criticism for not being able to handle the rush as well as he should. But overall, the biggest part of this game, of course, is what we're going to talk about with Gene right now, which is Patrick Mahomes looked like he dislocated his kneecap. They kind of snapped it back into place after kind of a short yardage play, got an X-ray, and had been ruled out immediately.
Well, let's get into it, Gene, and talk about this, because it seems like it was diagnosed pretty well from you and other of our medical brain trust. And as you said, there's not a lot of comparisons, but there's at least one that makes us think this might not be a season-ending injury, or maybe even an injury that will keep Mahomes out for more than a month. What do we know, and what are we waiting to find out?
Well, I think that's unfortunately the best case scenario. As you said, there's not a ton of NFL comparisons. A lot of the comparisons are situations that happened in December. So, those players are towards the end of their seasons and maybe a little bit more likely to have surgery for a couple of different reasons. The most direct comp, at least in general, for young quarterback middle of the season is Matthew Stafford, who had this injury when he was a rookie in 2009. Took 4 weeks to recover, ended up missing 2 games and a bye week before he came back. But there's not a lot of information about that injury to know whether or not I think from reading that the kneecap was fully out of place, and they brought him back with a brace. But what we don't know, and the Chiefs aren't likely to know, and Mahomes won't know until Friday, is what the MRI findings show. And whenever you have a dislocation, whether it's a small joint like a finger or a big joint like a hip, and this is more just of a kind of a bony dislocation than a full, this wasn't his knee that dislocated, is that there's soft tissue injury, and a stabilizing ligament has been torn. And depending on how loose the joint is, and potentially even whether or not this has happened before in Mahomes' career at some point when he was a high schooler or a college player, I don't think we're aware of that. But if there's any instance where this may have occurred in the past, even without fully coming out of the joint, then surgery is likely. And surgery for something like this to reconstruct the ligament and potentially deal with any cartilage issues that may be going along with this is a 6-month recovery process. So if we hear anything that suggests surgery overnight into tomorrow, and I don't think we're going to hear that until Friday, but it's going to be a season-ending situation. But there is a little bit of a glimmer of light, and I even think that 4 weeks on Stafford is probably early to hope for. A lot of times it takes closer to 6 weeks for some of these stabilizing ligaments to heal. So I think a month at the absolute earliest. I didn't go back and look at the bye weeks to see whether or not there was an easy early timetable to guess at. But I think it's a situation where we wait to see what the Chiefs have to say after his imaging studies tomorrow. And no surprise that they ruled him out tonight. And I don't know how much you guys are interested in seeing videos and things like this, but this is one of the situations where Monday Night Football with a bunch of extra cameras and HD video gave us a pretty good look of exactly what was going on when they came back from commercial.
Well, Gene, I mean, moving forward into some of the other injury looks here, Amari Cooper, you have listed as he's unlikely to play, but also you're hearing also from the beat reporters that he's saying he's practicing like he's going to play, and he feels better than he did last week. How much is that just wishful thinking?
He says he's better than he was last week, but he also says that he's not close to 100%, that he's still having pain when he runs, and he only managed 3 snaps last week. So, we've seen Cooper try to recover from these injuries, like many other players, veterans in the past, and play through them successfully. That did not happen last week. And if he's not that much better, it really doesn't make a lot of sense for him to go out there and try to battle through this injury again and potentially put him at risk of having some sort of compensatory injury. And we know he's already had a couple of things that have been bothering him. If that muscle just isn't working well, there's really no way for him to recover in time to play. So I've got him doubtful at best. I suppose there's the chance that we see some interval improvement and he feels better than expected entering his Friday practice, and we see him in some sort of limited fashion. But I think we're probably not going to get him back until after the Cowboys bye week.
Gene, George Kittle said they just do the injury report to mess with us. Is that true? No. Let's talk another tight end though, because we have Jimmy Graham, and I think maybe Green Bay might be better off without Jimmy Graham on the field anyway. We saw a similar situation this year where he ended up playing. And the reason I'm asking is because, well, let's just throw Green Bay's whole wide receiver depth chart in here. Basically, who is going to be healthy enough to catch passes from Aaron, or in Jimmy Graham's case, drop passes from Aaron Rodgers this weekend?
Well, I think you can make an argument that all 4 of those players may not play this week. I would guess that Jimmy Graham is probably the most likely to play, but he hasn't practiced on Wednesday or Thursday. We just know that that's been a situation for him in the past where he's not practiced and then played, including in Green Bay. I think Devontae Adams had some good things to say on Thursday about his practice participation coming around soon, where I think he said he felt 1,000,000 times better, but he's still not been cleared to practice, not even for individual drills. I think he was trying to, leave open the possibility, but I don't think there's really any chance that he plays this week. But I think, you feel a lot better about next week now after today's comments than you would have after essentially 3 weeks of no practice. Geronimo Allison, a Monday night concussion, conservative Green Bay medical staff. I think it's really unlikely that we see him playing. It doesn't seem like the chest injury is anything to be concerned about, but him progressing through concussion protocol in time to play on Sunday is going to be a really, really difficult thing and probably unlikely. Marquez Valdez-Scantling came back from what looked like a fairly low-grade high ankle sprain on Monday night. But again, the stiffness and swelling that occurs from these injuries within 24 hours kind of tells the tale. And it's not been great that he's not been able to return to practice yet. And hopefully what we see is they know that their entire receiving core is banged up and they're going to be relying on Allen Lazard and Jay Kumerow and Shepard at best. And they don't want to put Valdez-Scantling in harm's way at all. So maybe we see him do a little bit more in practice on Friday and play, but you have to consider him pretty questionable too. And we'll see what happens with Jimmy Graham in practice, but I don't think we're seeing Adams. I'll be shocked if we see Allison, and I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Valdez-Scantling or Graham practice enough tomorrow to play either.
Gene, what's going on with Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, so you don't really like any of this, right? So we didn't really know much about his ankle injury other than we got a pretty good vibe on Saturday night into Sunday morning. Heard it was just a little bit of swelling, but Tom Pelissero on Wednesday said that it's a high ankle type injury. Ian Rappaport kind of fumbled through a report where he said it was a high ankle, but it may not have been a sprain. I don't know what that means. We're kind of getting into Andrew Luck territory with those mismatch of words there. So you don't like that, a high ankle injury that was kind of limiting, to put you at risk of aggravation already. And then to my eyes, the video looked like an MCL sprain, not a significant one, but when his knee was tweaked and he went off the field, that's what it looked like to me. So a low-grade high ankle sprain would be enough sometimes to keep a running back out for a week or two. A low-grade MCL sprain would sometimes be enough to keep a running back out for a week or more. And he's got both injuries. He's not practiced at all. They've already signed a running back, Zach Zenner. I just don't see Kamara playing this week. And, the hope is that he comes back sooner than later, but I'm really doubtful that we see him do much in practice on Friday. And I'm expecting to hear that he's been declared out on Friday. I don't even think this is going to be a game time decision.
Gene, is it possible that Todd Gurley is not the most injured Rams running back?
Yeah. Sounds like he's making some progress. and that they're preparing for him to play. I'm not sure what's going on with Malcolm Brown. I didn't. The last I checked, they still hadn't put the Rams injury report up, so I'm not sure if he practiced today or not. He was able to play most of the snaps, that they wanted him to play through the fourth quarter, and it wasn't an obvious injury. So hopefully this is a situation where they're not sure which running back is going to be healthy enough to go, so they're taking their time and being careful with all of them. And the Rams have done that in the past. But yeah, I think you have to give Gurley a better chance than Brown of playing at this point.
So, Gene, how about David Johnson? Where are we at with him?
David Johnson was confusing this week because Cliff Kingsbury continued early in the week and even on Wednesday to talk about the back as the primary issue and something that could linger a little bit and give him some problems. But he's not listed on the injury report with a back. He's listed in the injury report with an ankle, and they haven't included the back. They didn't amend the injury report to suggest that was an error of some sort on Wednesday. And he was able to do a little bit of limited work on Thursday. So if the back was the primary concern and they're not listing him as having an issue with that on the injury report as requiring treatment, and hopefully the ankle is not a major concern, and he did take a really good number of snaps last week, and I would lean toward him playing on Thursday night, but we'll see if anything changes in the Friday practice report.
We covered Malcolm Brown, Gene. What about Marquise Brown? Is he going to be on the field in Seattle?
I don't think so. This was initially kind of billed as a minor injury. It was expected to not be a long-term injury, but he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. And John Harbaugh pretty specifically earlier in the week said if he doesn't get on the practice field, he's not going to play. So we'll know Friday whether or not. But the fact that he didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday makes it seem unlikely, especially because it's been 2 weeks now, that he's going to miraculously show up on the practice report as a full participant on Friday and then be cleared to play. So I'd be leaning towards him being doubtful at best too.
So, Gene, I've seen some really fun Twitter memes with Mitchell Trubisky and the harness. Basically him in kind of a baby's harness attached to his coach. But how much is that harness actually going to support that shoulder, and should we be concerned about that, especially because he's such a dynamic runner?
Yeah, it's not perfect. And I mean, you saw the mechanism in which he had to have that when the shoulder injury happened itself. So, that harness will be there reminding him that he probably should not be putting his arm out in that way. I mean, I know he's going after a fumble. It's kind of a fluke situation, but this isn't a situation where he gets hit on the outside or he gets driven into the turf on that side where it's likely to dislocate. The arm has to come away from the body in a fairly specific way, and the harness will be helpful there. It really shouldn't hinder his throwing motion. Shouldn't be anything else to be worried about there. So, it's kind of a pain control issue, and he's had a couple of weeks, 3 weeks now to recover before he comes back. So I would think he'd be fine, and it's just going to be terrible luck if something happens with the harness on.
Gene, speaking of pain control, what do we do with Amari Cooper? It's a Sunday night game, and I thought it was odd that we learned that there's no structural damage, but he's in a lot of pain. What could that possibly mean other than trying to decipher why we know those things?
Just this, these deep muscle bruises hurt. Think about a Charlie horse where you're continuing to bleed into the muscle, and that's kind of what goes on here. And when that happens, it hurts, and your muscle kind of shuts down. It's it's not necessarily like a cramp, but it's kind of similar to that sort of pain, and then your muscle just doesn't work well. So, I think we're going to have a pretty good idea from Dallas. There has to be something really positive on Friday to expect him to play this week. So again, I'm expecting him to be inactive, and I don't think there's going to be much consternation about it. I don't think it's something we're going to be talking about on Sunday morning. I think we're already going to know the outcome.
Gene, how much longer for Christian Kirk?
At least another week. Even though the kind of initial report suggested that maybe it wasn't as high grade a high ankle sprain as it looked on video, it was a pretty violent mechanism. These things, it's hard to cut. You can't stabilize that part. We talk about it all the time with these high ankle injuries. And, you ask a wide receiver to cut and stop. Running in a straight line and slowing down is okay, but it takes a little bit longer to stop and slow down. And that's important for running routes. And certainly moving laterally is key for running routes. And Cliff Kingsbury has said he's not ready yet. And Kirk wants to leave open the possibility that he'll be able to play this week, but I don't see that happening. I think next week is possible, but this week is really not likely at all.
Gene, it's hard. It's hard to find a tight end. Jared Cook had scored the last 2 weeks in a row. Chicago's been giving up a lot to tight ends. Teddy's looking for him. Now I feel like I might not be able to use him. Tell me what's going on with Cook.
I don't know what's going on with Cook. There's very little out of New Orleans, and I didn't see anything obvious in the game book or otherwise to point to one particular play. I haven't had a chance to go back kind of play by play and frame by frame and speculate whether or not it's one type of an ankle injury versus another. The tone of the local writers suggests that the two back-to-back missed practices this week are of concern, and it's not just a little bit of veteran rest, and that we'll see him back. I don't know that's been confirmed yet, but I think questionable at best, doubtful is likely if you believe the tone of the local reports.
For the sake of Dak Prescott, what's going on with Tyron Smith and La'el Collins, and how soon will they be back?
Yeah, this is another situation where Jerry Jones is just, you can't trust his optimism around these things, and they were at least, yeah. From Tony Romo to, all of these guys over the years, he's always a little. From Des Bryant, I think he wanted Des Bryant to be back in 2 hours from his broken foot bone. I don't know if the players necessarily appreciate that always or not. Tyron Smith's ankle injury looked significant, and maybe you give a big tough lineman the benefit of the doubt versus a skill position player but these linemen need a lot of they get stressed in different ways, but it's just as important ways on those high ankle sprains than the skill position players do. So they were both back on the practice field doing a little bit of rehab work today, and Dak Prescott probably wishful thinking said they looked good enough to me, I'm sure, after the last couple of weeks, that he'd like to have both of them back. But high ankle sprain for Smith, MCL sprain, despite what Jerry Jones says for Collins. Both of them are probably getting closer. If they play this week, they're likely to be limited at high risk of aggravation. So I would lean towards both of them being inactive as well. But Collins may be a little bit closer than Smith, but it's going to be hard for either one of them to play.
And Zach Martin missed practice today too, right?
Yes, but he's going to be fine. The ankle is not an issue, and they're not really worried about his back. So even though he was limited on Wednesday and missed practice on Thursday, that was more of just a let's take it easy on you today more than anything else.
Gene, got some good news. I'll give you something uplifting to talk about. Russell Okung sounds like he's cleared to play and may even play this weekend. From a medical perspective, is there any pause of his level of play, conditioning, otherwise? What do you expect? Because this is a pretty unique situation.
Yeah, I think that's the question. I think that the question that was answered this week was, you're okay for contact, but is he in condition to play a football game? I don't know. I don't know that I picked up on Okung likely to play this week or not. I don't know that they're going to put him on the active roster by the end of the week and let him go. The Chargers, the injury list with the Chargers is just a total mess. And so you hope that they get him back sooner than later. I'm still kind of skeptical that it's going to be this week, but it looks like it's coming soon.
Well, for the sake of Jimmy Garoppolo, can we look at Joe Staley and Mike McGlinchey? Is there any chance that they are going to be back sooner than 6 to 8 weeks, as you prognosticated?
Well, that's what it was initially, right? So I think we're probably looking at week 10 for both of them. The latest I read was that they think that Staley is probably a week ahead of McGlinchey. So we'll see Staley in 1 week and McGlinchey the week after, but we're probably still a couple of weeks from that happening.
Well, Gene, Tyrell Williams, that's a good one. Even though we're not going to see him this week, we did get some specific information about his plantar fasciitis, and it's not doing better. So is this a situation of pain tolerance, basically? Is there any way this is going to get better during the season?
We're kind of in that Antonio Gates and many other players over here, maybe even a little bit of Amari Cooper in the offseason, but he had a lot of time to rest in the offseason, and for to put yourself back on the field and aggravate that foot with you put a little bit of an orthotic in the shoe and try to support it and get some injections to try to settle things down. But it doesn't seem like he's made much progress through the bye week, hasn't been back to practice. And, having missed a game before a bye week and after the bye week, it really seems like they're going to give him every chance for that injury to cool down. And some of these things can be 4 to 6 week situations if you give them enough time to rest. So I don't think we're going to see him this week. It is definitely something that could linger throughout the season, but hopefully we get him back within the next couple of weeks too.
So, Za'Darius Smith, the knee issue that he's been dealing with, it seemed like between every other pressure of Dak Prescott, 2 weeks ago, he was on the ground and needing some help, and then he'd get right back up and take it to Prescott. Are we going to see more of that this coming week, or is this an issue we really need to be careful of?
Both. He's been fully practicing. I think this is one of those, again, when we talked about Todd Gurley and Sony Michel and Jerick McKinnon in this offseason, these guys have degenerative knee conditions. And when you see a player back and forth and hit his knee and miss some time, if there was a little bit of a meniscus fragment in there, they probably would have gone in and gotten it and bring him back in 2 or 3 weeks. But if he's got some arthritic conditions in there and he's got some inflammation, some swelling, or maybe a little bit of bursitis if it's not arthritic, I mean, there's lots of little things that could be going on in there where from play to play it could crop up on him a little bit. But for the last couple of weeks, he's pretty much been fully practicing. They didn't put him on the game status report at all last week. That'll probably be the case again this week with the full practice on Wednesday and Thursday already. So I'd expect him to get a pretty good number of snaps, but it could be a situation where we see him miss a series or end up missing some practice at some point in the future too.
We got Ryan Skelly in the chat room, Gene, and you've been fantastic. I mean, this is speaking of efficiency and answers and information per minute, Gene. You're killing it tonight. I guess it's the Mahomes injury has really got you hyper focused.
No, this is making up for last week when I rambled on and on and on and on and on and on and on.
No.
You're getting that.
Well, the analytics guy said his EPA was low, so now they got to get it up.
Yeah,
they're giving him high tea for his EPA.
This is good. This is going to be a great. The second half hour of the show should be fantastic. So Ryan Skelly wants to know. Here we go. Did you talk Dede? Whoops. Let me get it back up there. Did you talk Dede shoulder? I sat Nicole for him.
Did you all see anything about the shoulder other than he didn't practice? I mean, I did a fairly extensive search and I didn't really see much discussion about it at all. And there were a few players like that on the Thursday report where they showed up as a DNP kind of unexpectedly, and you really have no idea whether it's a new injury or just sort of a nagging thing where they're giving them a day off and marking it down as a minor situation or not. So I didn't get any impression today that there's something to be concerned about. I don't know. Did you see something that?
No,
had y'all concerned that he wasn't going to go? So with that in mind, I think we're probably going to see him practice on Friday. Maybe listed questionable because that's what the Jaguars tend to do. But I don't have a lot of concern that he's not going to go on Sunday. But I'm waiting to get a little bit more information as the weekend moves on.
Well, and what I'm wondering about here is all we're just seeing is he was showed up on the injury report. But with a shoulder injury, what I'm worried about is just if there's some sort of other situation that we didn't know about, because why would he have to miss practice with it? Unless it's like you said, there's a range of outcomes here that he just shows up practices Friday, isn't even on the injury report.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be situations like Alvin Kamara where, we find out that maybe there was a little bit more there or not. And, we just sort of have to take it practice report by practice report. But in the absence of a known injury during the game or a local or national report saying that this cropped up and it's a big concern, and maybe that happens on Friday, then I'm not going to overreact to Wednesday and Thursday practice reports because we're seeing more and more and more guys not practice at all and then not even be on the injury report. I think Green Bay put 30 people on their injury report last week, and only 4 of them were on the game status report. So there's like 20 guys on there, and none of them were even listed as questionable by the time the end of the week goes on. And I think at this point, again, we're always willing to be surprised. A player or two, I'm not going to be correct in my speculation about whether or not they're likely to play or not. But I think we're just going to have to wait until Friday to get enough information about Westbrook to say one way or the other.
So, Gene, you get to choose here. You can either talk about the latest selection or the latest edition of the C.J. Mosley groin watch, or we could go to. I'd just like to know what are some injuries that players play with in the NFL that they might not play with as often in college that are kind of welcome to the NFL moments of like, now you've got to learn what rub some dirt in it and play actually really means.
Probably all of the above. I mean, there's certain things, there's certain structural issues that you just, there's not enough stability in said joint or otherwise that you can play through. But I would imagine that there's a ton of things that we don't even hear about that players are playing through, from all of these arthritic conditions to, I'm certain that you're probably only hearing about 10% of the limiting back things that are going on. And there have been a number of players already this year that have had, epidural injections infections in their back that we don't have any idea about. Players playing through rib injuries that they probably wouldn't have played through in college. Any number of things. So that
Which of
list,
those are probably most difficult to sleep with?
I think if you listen to Rob Gronkowski's, these guys probably are barely sleeping at all.
Yeah.
Who knows what's necessary to get them comfortable enough to sleep in the week after a game. I mean, that the list of those sorts of things they might not even fit on the whiteboard behind you there. CJ Mosley finally got some positive news on him this week. I'm hoping we see Monday night it may still be pushing it. If he plays, it's probably going to be in a little bit of a limited role. But the Jets, I think there are 5 linebackers listed on the Jets, and maybe more than that if you count Jordan Jenkins, who I usually classify as an edge. But from Cashman to Mosley to McClellan to Hewitt, they're all on the injury report right now in various stages of early week pain. So they may all be rotating a little bit. And the hope is that when he comes back, if he comes back in a rotational role, that we don't get any setbacks. And they've been pretty careful about making sure that he's going to be ready to go when he comes back. So if they can get those other guys healthy enough to play, we'll probably see them give him one more week, even though it's New England, and just sort of see how we go.
I want to ask you one last question. We have to do another round, unless there's something you want to get in, Matt. Is Kyle Long going to retire? I mean, what happened? Because I saw that clip earlier this year where it looked like he couldn't even get around to block somebody when he was pulling. He just fell into them. And the next thing we hear, he's on IR, and they're suggesting he's going to retire. How can you reverse engineer this piece together? Because he did have 3 surgeries this offseason?
Yeah.
Andy Korn.
So it'll kind of depend on what the hip condition is itself. Is it something so degenerative that he's on the verge of, needing hip replacement sooner than later? Is it an impingement situation by which he can have surgery and sort of clean things up a little bit, labrum and some bone spurs and things like that, and have a 4 to 6 month recovery and be back better than what he's been over the last couple of years? That's a tough question to answer, but it's just another indication. He tried to play through that for a couple of weeks and just wasn't able to do so. And, he went last week and did the best he could, and then just sort of decided that this just isn't going to work. So I think that's probably where we are with him. Hopefully he's back next year.
And where we are always getting our excellent information from Dr. Jene Bramel. Gene, I'm going to ask you just an indulgent question. What did this season, because I know you were putting in countless hours keeping up with all of these situations for us, what in this season has been fun for you? Are you enjoying? What stories or teams or players have been something that have made you happy other than Ben Roethlisberger getting injured?
I was having fun with all of my Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson teams. So I, as much of a defensive guy as I am, I do like watching good quarterback play. So I was making a point to watch the Ravens and the Chiefs as much as possible. It was a little bit disappointing to see them kind of have some bobbles over the last couple of weeks, but I was having fun with this. I'm hoping that Mahomes comes back at some point this year. I'm also hoping that we don't see Lamar Jackson take 250 carries and some of the beating that he continues to take, because that, as we've talked about with, going back to RG3 and Michael Vick and Randall Cunningham, we weren't doing podcasts when Randall Cunningham was flipping through the air. But we always, the career for those guys are short. It happened to Dante Culpepper. It happened a bit to Michael Vick. It happened to RG3. I'm really hoping that. Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily put Andrew Luck in the same category as those other guys necessarily as far as higher risk of injury. But I'm hoping that Lamar Jackson is a little bit of an exception to the rule, or the Ravens find a way to keep the threat of him running that often in the offense, but don't put him in harm's way too much too often.
Gene, you're the exception to every rule that makes us feel depressed about humanity at times, with all the good things that you're doing for us and for everybody that you serve. And I just, every week, you challenge me to try to keep that transition segue game up. And I need to do that to match your excellence. Thank you on this somber night for bringing the heat.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the rest of this third quarter and the fourth quarter doesn't bring us anything new. One was enough for tonight. So we'll follow up on Sunday morning.
Noah Fant drops? There's going to be some new Noah Fant drops.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Those two are pretty brutal, including this. I'm sure you're talking about that. If that last one was anything like the first one, not good.
Not good. Well,
All right,
thank you,
y'all.
Doc. And we
Yep.
will carry on, Matt.
Good luck.
Yeah.
You wish him good luck too.
Yeah, right. We all need a little bit of good luck. I know I need
That's
some
right.
good luck.
Yeah, we all could use it.
So, Matt, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Speaking of all great Matts out there, Matt Moore may be showing a little bit of fantasy potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to understand that, Matt Moore was actually a very good pickup. I know that they talked about it on the broadcast that he was a scout for the Dolphins this year before he got the call. But this is a guy that was kind of an intriguing backup for the Carolina Panthers and the Miami Dolphins. Had a couple of good seasons when he got extended playing time. He's pretty nifty in the pocket. He's someone that also can break the pocket, get outside, and throw the ball downfield well. And you have to understand that he hasn't had any reps with the first team all year. He didn't get any this week, of course, even on a short week. So this is his first, chance to get acquainted with this offense. And it's probably Andy Reid's first chance to get acquainted with what is it that we should do with him? What does he do best? What are we going to? So if this is a multi-week injury for Patrick Mahomes, don't be surprised within a couple of weeks that you see Matt Moore actually perform very well, because, I mean, we have to remember this offensive line, while it's not as good as it was last year, isn't bad. And the skill players here are very good. So I don't see the need for them to like trade for anybody at this stage. It's probably going to be an expensive proposition to do that anyhow. But I think that Matt Moore is the type of guy that if you're playing in a 2-quarterback league, you pick him up, because, I mean, this is him versus Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill might do well, but at the same time, you look at the surrounding talent on this Chiefs offense, and you have to remember too that sometimes you're in football. What's kind of crazy is that when you have all this talent around you, and then you have a quarterback with unlimited potential, sometimes the coaching staff can get a little bit too wild and crazy with what they want to do. And then it just seems like things aren't clicking as well as it should, because they're trying to do new things or different things, or the quarterback's trying to do something different and overthink it. And then when you have a more limiting factor involved, remember like Dak Prescott versus Tony Romo, you put Dak Prescott in that offense and with the Cowboys, and suddenly he's a top 5 fantasy quarterback, even though he was still trying to figure out how to be an NFL quarterback year one, because of the way that they just kind of got more focused about, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to execute. And it's not just all about what wild theories of football we can implement here that's going to please the people on Twitter who do all the X's and O's and film study.
And is Noah Fant really just Eric Ebron in disguise?
I will say this. I mean, I'm not going to say too much.
Let me interject and say, I'm asking this question, Matt, because I know the answer. Was seeing these kinds of struggles predictable based on what we saw of him at Iowa?
Oh, absolutely, because he fought the football at Iowa, and that's the whole thing, is that he'll get better at it, because the technique, it's kind of like Cortland Sutton last year, and that's kind of how I described it, is that congratulations, Denver, you drafted Cortland Sutton, just the bigger version of him, where basically you got a great athlete who's going to need a little bit more time to adjust, just because he doesn't use the correct hand position all the time, and then he fights the football, and he doesn't, and as a result, from play to play, you have situations that he should catch, footballs that he doesn't. But I think it's something that projects well for it to get better. It just wasn't planning. I just didn't think it was going to be a good year. The more surprising thing for me has been TJ Hawkinson dropping the ball, but his drops have been more difficult catches where Matthew Stafford's like, here, we need a Calvin Johnson type of catch here with somebody on you, hitting you in the red zone. Like his drops were catches that would put him in the Pro Bowl if he made all of them. Whereas these drops with Noah Fant are more like, slap your forehead kind of drops.
There's a lot of things we could talk about now, but of course we're going to see each other Sunday morning too. So I don't want to steal a lot of the thunder from Sunday morning. But one of the things I think you're uniquely situated to tell us, because Atlanta's been I call them the welcome mat, or the fantasy all-you-can-eat buffet, and they're facing the Rams. And who, based on the unique difficulties Atlanta has on defense, who are we looking at here among Woods, Cooks, obviously you're playing Cup, Everett, Higbee, and then we'll leave the running backs for the second part of the question.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Atlanta is the hospitality capital of the Southeast. So I will definitely say that, Cooper Kupp's a great choice because really the issue is the back seven of this defense, mainly the linebackers and the safeties who have issues being able to, handle correct angles and to be able to tackle, and also just their coverage is ridiculous. Mark Schofield and I did a podcast about it. Mark talked about how badly Atlanta dropped deep, turned their backs to the quarterback, and just let David Johnson just roll through up the seam for a long gain. And I'm sure that I could find a Carolina play where Carolina played this similar defense and didn't do it like that because it was just ridiculous. So, obviously the running back who's going to get the opportunity to catch the ball in the backfield is going to be a big deal there. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I think Everett is a decent play to consider, especially because of the fact that they'll pair him up in different ways, both inline and split outside. Robert Woods is going to be a fine play this weekend because he basically runs routes everywhere in terms of what you're looking for inside, as well as outside. And if Desmond Trufant doesn't play again due to a toe injury, and even he's susceptible because he's as athletic as he is, he's undisciplined. You have a pair of rookies. So, this definitely is an all you can eat kind of deal here. And they're definitely going to show Southern hospitality.
I don't know if folks will get the reference anymore, but we used to call these games, Matt, we would call it an Oprah game. You get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown. Everybody gets a touchdown.
Yeah.
You face the Atlanta Falcons. Go ahead. So Darrell Henderson, and let me set it up for you this way, because in some ways this is more on the couch stuff, and we'll show people how I think about these things. I wonder, and your video, and it was great to see everyone's reaction to your video that you put up.
It's like a litmus test.
Well, not just a litmus test, but I really think that people see these rookies and they consider them like a batch of qualities and attributes, and not as you bring that word integrated in it factor, they don't understand what it looks like in context. And you can say Darrell Henderson has an incredible burst, and Darrell Henderson has the, he even on an NFL field should stand out, and then he does. Is this one of those momentous build up? I mean, Malcolm Brown's hurt. Todd Gurley is Todd Gurley. And again, I have to point out that once he missed a game last year, we never knew what we were going to get if he did play. And once he played, we didn't know how well he was going to play. Usually the answer was not well at all. Is this a week to overpay for Darrell Henderson? Is this a week to take that chance? I know it's not the same Rams offense as last year. Does it matter though? Or at least does it matter? And the other thing I'm looking at here is next week they have Cincinnati. Later on in the season, they're going to get Baltimore and Arizona and Seattle. And Dallas's defense didn't look great either. They have the Steelers, they have the Bears, they have San Francisco in week 16. But are we all going to look back and say we should have seen it coming when Darrell Henderson runs away from the Falcons defense 2 or 3 times on Sunday?
My gut feeling is no. But I think that there are conditions to that. If you are a team that is just trying to win you have to win every week to contend for the playoffs, then you overpay for Darrell Henderson, because most likely you don't have the running backs in order to start that you need, and you need somebody who might give you that potential. So you do that. If you're a team that maybe is 3-3 or 4-2, but everyone in your league who you have teams that you look at their rosters versus yours, and that you've been in a lot of could have lost situations when you look at your all play record and all that kind of thing, then maybe you take the chance with him. But if you're just being greedy, and what I mean out there, when you're just being greedy, you probably don't want to do that with him, because the Todd Gurley thing to me was very telling from the Kansas City game, or in the first quarter of that game, when he ran out of bounds to the right sideline that something was up, and I thought he was out for the year the way he looked. So I don't think we had any of that this year with him. I just think that this is just a garden variety quad injury. He's just a slightly less explosive Todd Gurley than what we've seen, and so we're still in the stage of worrisome, being worried and kind of neurotic about him in terms of, and it's understandable. It's just that's how we're kind of being with him. So it's going to be a split. I think Henderson could be a nice play this week if they feel like they're going to give him more work and show confidence in him to expand on his game a little bit. But I think that he's going to be up and down because it's still about him learning how to run between the tackles. Yeah. Just because Atlanta may stink doesn't mean, Miles Sanders would probably do the same thing to Atlanta, but we've seen what Miles Sanders is about right now. He needs another offseason, even though he's liking Instagram posts about how he's not being used well enough. Maybe he also needs to spend less time on Instagram and more time in the playbook and, looking at backs who actually know how to run between the tackles. Because if he does that, maybe by, week 14, week 15, he might become a really good NFL technician in addition to being a great athlete who can catch and block.
So as a sub question of that question, is it maybe time then to throw a speculative trade or two out there for Todd Gurley?
Wow. Yeah, I could see how you could do that as well. And I think that makes sense. It just depends on which way you believe. Like my recommendation is I would go for Todd Gurley rather than Darrell Henderson. But if you're someone that just is full-blown believing that Darrell Henderson is the guy and you're going to rue the day that you listen to me about this if it didn't work out, and you're going to feel sick to your stomach about it because you're kind of more of the control freak kind of person in terms of how you play your fantasy leagues, but then ask questions and wanting that person to agree with you. Listen, that's the kind of fantasy owner I would probably be. I have to say that. So if you trust your own gut with what you're doing and it says Henderson, then you go for him. But my recommendation, my opinion is that Todd Gurley, as long as that injury was really just a 1 week thing that looks like it was, I would stick with him. And even though he's not going to be exciting, he's going to be a solid RB2, whereas Henderson is probably going to be up and down depending on whether Malcolm Brown's available again,
right,
and whether or not this offense actually does anything to adjust to make him a worthwhile play now that Gurley's back.
And don't forget about John Kelly. I mean, if it gets this could be one of those right situation, wrong player where the team doesn't trust Darrell Henderson as much as we might, but they still have John Kelly around there. I want to ask you more of a broad question about Darren Waller, but not Darren Waller specifically, because I think we've watched the Darren Waller story unfold from he was a kind of a bargain bin version of Demaryius Thomas or Calvin Johnson coming out of Georgia Tech, similar physically, but not as a football player. Ravens tried him as a receiver. Then I think the Ravens originally tried him as a tight end. He had some issues with league discipline policies. The Raiders got really excited, and here's another one to remember. Sometimes preseason, off-season hype is actually an indicator. It was the indicator for Darren Waller as he just got an extension. Are we seeing Darren Waller and Ricky Seals-Jones is doing some stuff now for Cleveland again? Are teams, because now we've both seen under the hood enough, you a lot more than me, to know that teams really do have sometimes rigid, sometimes not so rigid, but a picture of a threshold for players to play a certain role or position. But now maybe we're seeing different roles also at the NFL level than we've seen before. Are there going to be more? Because tight end, as I said when I asked Gene about Jared Cook, tight end's been rough this year, rougher than most years. We're only 6 weeks in. Are we going to see more Darren Wallers, more Ricky Seals-Jones? Is the position changing to embrace these oversized wide receivers?
I don't think it's changing as much as we might think, mainly because Ricky Seals-Jones was really replacing a guy like David Njoku, and it's a desperation replacement, if you ask me, more than anything. And also Demetrius Harris is hurt, right? So if he's really the third or fourth guy on their list that they brought in here. Darren Waller was a priority guy. And I think the thing with Waller that we're looking at here is that though they tried him at tight end, they were basically 3 deep at tight end by the time Darren Waller matured enough to actually show that he was ready to go. And they had already pretty much felt comfortable with Boyle and Andrews and Hurst at this stage, that it was like, they're younger. We've signed them to longer term. They have more time left on their contracts. They're playing well enough. We're not going to put Waller in here into this mix, especially with the track record that he showed off the field. And we're happy for him that he's matured, but let's move on. I think that, and with Waller, it's going to be an interesting thing for me, because what are we going to see from him as a blocker? We haven't really seen him as a blocker. He's essentially, you're right, he's essentially a big receiver. And to me, as productive as he has been from a fantasy perspective, how helpful has he been to an offense as a whole in terms of not limiting them in looks? At least with guys like Hooper, Kelsey, Kittle, even Ertz, I'm kind of holding my nose when I say that about Ertz and his blocking, but he's gotten better. When you put him into that mix, it makes the offense a little less predictable, and they can do a lot of different things still. That I think with Waller, you pretty much know what you get with him right now. He just happens to be athletic enough that he's still a matchup problem, and that's fine. But his game still has to slowly improve, and I think more than anything, he was really an excitement bargain bin kind of addition who can pose a matchup problem for what Gruden likes to do.
Foster Moreau. I wonder if Foster Moreau might end up being as valuable as Waller, as he has been for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And how much do you love, by the way, and I know you especially love this, that they're working out LeGarrette Blount and Bo Scarborough. I'm not saying this is a direct response to their wide receiver woes, but hey, let's push all in on this model.
I did not know that, but I love it. Yes.
Isn't it great?
Yes.
LeGarrette Blount got to work out in Oakland, and Bo Scarborough got to work out the off-brand Derrick Henry. So we see what Oakland's plan is. I'm really rooting for them to keep this going, because as much as I've ridiculed John Gruden,
me too.
He's making it work. And I think that something we've talked about and we touched on Tuesday is this idea of these well-coached teams that care about the physical clash and winning that on a play-by-play basis, and getting everybody pulling in the same direction, and a team ethos about physical superiority in terms of will, in terms of desire. Gruden has put together a team, and Antonio Brown, I don't think he actually affected the team blueprint that much.
They punched the Bears in the mouth.
Yeah.
And the Bears didn't respond very well. I mean, listen, this is something I've talked about in a piece I wrote, the RSP, called Deny Emotion. You only see a fraction of the game, and certainly we over intellectualize football at certain points, and there is a heavy intellectual aspect to it. And I appreciate, as much as I guess there's jokes that I'm shaking a fist at the cloud of analytics, I do appreciate it. And most of the people who are shaking the cloud along with me are actually a lot younger than I am. They just happen to be more knowledgeable than the folks who are kind of, data thumping their orthodox tome, I guess, of whatever it is that they built, or whatever medicine show that they're trying to put out there. And I'm not saying all people, I'm just saying a fraction of who they are. But when I look at this, it's one of the problems is that you think about football and all the theoretical stuff that we talk about with it, and at some point it does come down to physicality, because have you ever seen that smart? You ever see the kids who are who may be high on brains but low on the physicality and toughness, and they play a sport and they get hurt, maybe not hurt badly, but something happens to them where they're physically dominated on some level. And then they quit, and then they start making excuses about all of the things that didn't go right by the rules, or didn't go right, on an intellectual, rule-based sort of theoretical level. And it's like, shut up. This is not, you were just dominated. That happens. This is not, this is not government. You're playing football, it's not a laboratory. Other things happen here. So you have to understand that's the same type of attitude that happens in the league, is that it's a performance sport, whether it's nerves, whether it's being psyched out, whether it's being physically dominated, or all three things. People shut down. And when and I know players like to pretend that, or try to say, I'm not scared, or that didn't bother me, but I'll just, if Jim Brown said that he got nervous before every game, Jim Brown, okay, I don't care who says that they're not scared before every game, because if that guy says that, then everyone else is lying. Okay. I mean, it's the type of situation where you have to understand that football can either be a very highly intellectual, theoretical, complicated type of thing, and it can work that way to a degree, or it can be a very basic, we're going to run these 4 or 5 types of plays and do different variations of it like the 49ers do, and we're going to shove it down your throat. And both can work, but there still has to be enough balance to where that when you're facing an opponent that says we can be just as tough as you, well, you have to be smarter than them then. And if you have a team that says, listen, everything you want to do theoretically sounds fine, but we figured out a way to shut that down. Well, you better be tough, because you're going to have to do those things. So it's just about, again, integrating everything into the game. And I think that sometimes as analysts, because we dissect things so much as we do, that we don't always remember that we have to still kind of consider football as an integrated performance medium.
And if we talk about it as winning a Super Bowl, Matt, it's more like those missions where 200 men leave and 50 come back, and surviving.
And it's not always the smartest people.
No, no.
It's a wisdom thing sometimes. Sometimes it's common sense and wisdom. Some of the smartest people I know don't have a lick of common sense.
Yeah.
That's
what they said about me. That's what they always said about me when I was a kid. And this is look at me now. Who's laughing now? I get to talk about football for a living. So there's common sense. Would common sense have told you in 2006 that fantasy football would be a profession?
Right.
I don't think
people are listening to us. Yeah. Okay.
Right. No, it's good. It's funny, Matt, because when you're saying that too, I'm picturing like Raising Arizona, Nicolas Cage, when Tex Cobb it's just pulverizing him, and he looks down and he has the little grenade pin, and he's like, I'm sorry. Like sometimes you just have to have those moments to make it through a football season. And why is it always the Patriots that get those moments, though? But I think that we do deny that the survival instinct. I think there's a layer here about, and we're getting into on the couch stuff now, about why a devout religious devotion is common in the NFL. It's the sense of just giving over all the things you can't control to something else, so you just focus on what you're doing,
or escape from things that aren't all that good in your life, where you have an outlet to be able to release emotion in a positive way that's constructive, and as opposed to being destructive. And there are people who definitely have found that outlet in organized sport.
Yeah, and I see a lot of that down in New Orleans and some of the cultural stuff we do with the Mardi Gras Indians, or music in general. Same idea. I mean, there's a song, and the artist Trumpet Black, I think, passed away, but it's trumpets, not guns. This idea. Football can absolutely do that. Sports can do that. But there's a lot more going on here than just things that can be reduced down to that narrow lens of statistical analysis. And like you said, you're denying seeing a big part of the game. So circling all the way back to more fantasy red meat again. So I look back over my fantasy football seasons, Matt, and I always think like, right situation, wrong player. Like that year that I thought it was going to be Aaron Stecker and it was Pierre Thomas, or I had the impulse at the right time, but I misdirected it. Is that impulse? Is that eagerness to want to go out and overpay for Darrell Henderson? Should that really be directed at Devin Singletary?
It very well might, because when you look at this team, I mean, it's a pretty physical defense. They want to run the football. When they do the type of scheme that they run is something where I think that Darrell Henderson can perform pretty well. And he's that guy that, I mean, I talked about it on Twitter today, is that, I've said it repeatedly here, short, short, kind of slow, not very good quickness in terms of measurements. But because he processes the game very fast, he has great footwork and he has good judgment as a runner in terms of vision. Those types of things that he does do well can make him the exception to the rule for all the, all the metric things that he doesn't perform very well at from the standard of being a top running back. And Frank Gore kind of gave him a glowing recommendation and endorsement, just saying that of all the backs that he's worked with, he's most like him. And really is very excited about him. And I think that this is a team that needs to run the ball, wants to run the ball. And where with Henderson, I don't think you're going to see Henderson figure it out this year. I don't think you're going to see Todd Gurley suddenly just dive off a cliff this year. And if he does, Malcolm Brown, I think, will be healthy enough to take up the slack. And the problem for me is that I think that, while this team really has to live by the pass, if that happens, even though Henderson is an exciting player, I think Devin Singletary might be the guy to consider because of the fact that he will have to split time with Frank Gore. But this team has the kind of schedule and the type of mindset that will play well for Singletary to get steady touches.
Last question tonight, and we'll pick up where we left off, including with Dr. Gene on Sunday morning, as we always do. I'm starting to get excited about blowing up the Death Star, or at the very least, knocking a little panel off the Death Star Monday night when the Jets play New England. But what kind of vibe are you getting here? Is this more about Jerry Jones and Dallas being overconfident, and the Jets just caught them with their gloves down in the ring and landed knockout punches? Whereas Adam Gase and all the talk, because, if there was anybody we like to ridicule more than John Gruden this offseason, it was Adam Gase, right?
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden you look at what Adam Gase has and you think, especially with Sam Darnold in the center of this looks like a night and day compared to what we saw week one. And then we look at the schedule coming up, and this could be a very productive offense. Is Adam Gase going to show us maybe that we shouldn't have been ridiculing his offensive mind now that he has some pieces he didn't have down in Miami? Or are we going to look right for putting tacos around his head?
Well, it's kind of funny because I said that, Chase Stewart commented about something and Jason and I were having a debate about Jared Goff, and basically Chase said, started bringing up Sam Darnold being elite. And I said, I'm surprised that you could even comment with your thumb in your mouth over that game. And he said, that's not my thumb. And I was like, wow, okay. So Chase, the big thing that I would say is that when you think about what Dallas does as a defense, I don't think they hide a lot of what they do. They're more about, we're athletic, we're going to be faster than you, we're going to cover you tight man to man, and you're just going to have to beat our athletes, and we're going to put our athletes in position to win. When it's on the Patriots, way different story. They're the intellectual team in terms of what they do on defense. On offense, they're much more, we're going to cram it down your throat, and then we'll use Tom Brady and his intellect to do some things as well. They're more of a combo team. But on defense, they trick you. And Sam Darnold is kind of more of I would say he's kind of more like a young Ben Roethlisberger in the way that he can create in and outside the pocket. He's going to stand in there with the bullets flying. He's going to make off-platform throws. And he's not very good at reading coverages that drop into the middle at the last moment and not identifying it, or where coverages switch off and that they're not exactly man-to-man and the zone isn't exactly how it appeared. So pre-snap, post-snap, I still think he has some lingering issues there that he can be taken advantage of, and that I think the Patriots will with him, because you saw some things with what they did with Daniel Jones last week when we were watching this game, where they were playing more of a cover. It looked like a man-to-man type of situation. Then they went to cover two, and they switched with the linebacker and the cornerback on a two-man route combination that led to an interception where the linebacker kind of buzzed over to the flat, and Daniel Jones was reading the corner route for the actually it was the opposite. He was reading the corner route, thinking the corner route was going to be up against the linebacker, and as the linebacker got, as the tight end went past the linebacker, Stephon Gilmore rolled off the flat route of the receiver and went to the corner route, and Daniel Jones didn't see that at all. I think that you're going to see that type of thing be set up for a guy like Darnold. They did it with Deshaun Watson last year with having a receiver or a defender run literally across the width of the field to intercept the ball in the back of the end zone. And they did some cover switching that they did that with Goff as well. I think you're going to see it with Darnold. So not just yet. There'll be some good moments with him, but enough bad ones that the Patriots are going to win this game.
Okay, I've got to ask you, Matt, because having worked with you for as long as I have, I mean, I have the utmost respect for your professional integrity. When I ask you this question, did you see what Sam Darnold said about the Cowboys after the game?
No, what did he say?
He said, they just kind of did what they do. They do it every single week. They just play one high safety, occasionally two high, and they like to stop the run. I knew I had to throw the ball today to have success, and we did that. So basically aligning with exactly what you said, which is the Cowboys on defense aren't going to show that, so maybe we can't get too excited just yet. We'll see what happens. But then for fantasy, folks, just remember that after New England, Jacksonville, and Miami, Giants, Washington, Oakland, Cincinnati, Miami.
Riches.
Yeah, those are defenses that even make the Dallas defense look good. So get those Jets while you can, especially if New England does make Adam Gase more of a laughing stock on Monday night. But we'll be back for you Sunday morning. We'll be back from you week after week. Even if we shake our fists at clouds, we're having fun. And we're enjoying it. We're not taking ourselves too seriously. We're not taking the game too seriously. We are taking seriously the human beings that are putting it all on the line for our entertainment and stimulation and being part of each other's lives. We appreciate everybody showing up in the chat room. The community, I feel like, has really come together this year around our show. But there are a lot of people here like Wendell, Rita, who's been here all along, and many others. So thank you, everybody, for being part of our community, for sharing this ride with us, even on somber nights like tonight. But cheer up, because there's a lot more great football to come, a lot more moments for us to hyperanalyze and otherwise enjoy together. So as always, folks, stay classy.
Can I get a hallelujah?